become a very sensitive political potato, for lack of other problems, I guess, you know.
Certainly is true that green technology, whether wind power, sun power, solar, etc., is very expensive. Even in California, it's very expensive. So it's a choice in which one then decides to go, and it gets involved in a lot of these environmental questions. Another question to put you on the spot, Consul General. We heard about poverty. I don't know if you know it, but sitting where you sat 3 years ago was former President Toledo of Peru, who is a graduate of the University of San Francisco, and the first Quechua-speaking Indian president of Peru. So I ask you now, when we hear poverty figures, are these mainly made up of the Indian populations in the south, the Mapuche, or are they spread across a large swath of the Chilean population? Who makes up the poverty groups at the bottom?
I think poverty, well, first of all, let me say that we have been reducing our poverty levels in a very dramatic way. When we recovered democracy in 1990, the poverty line was 40% of the population, and now we have just 13%. So we have done a tremendous effort to reduce poverty, because we understand that the fruit of the development must be shared by all the population, not by a small segment of the population. So, saying that, I would say that poverty is not particularly concentrated in a particular sector or segment of the population. It is spread out across the country. But of course, if you analyze more carefully the figures, there are some regions. Chile is divided in regions. As you are in a state, we are divided in regions. We have 15 regions. So there are regions that have a higher percentage of poverty. Particularly, I would say some regions in the south, and of course in the region where most of the Mapuches are located. I mean to the 9th region. So if the national percentage of poverty is 14%, I don't have the figure by heart, but I can imagine that the poverty rate in La Araucanía, which is the name of the 9th region, should be about 19%. So it's higher than the average of the country. And why is that? Well, because they have they don't have had good education. They also have some social problems. So yes, I would say that the indigenous people in Chile suffer a higher proportion of poverty. But this is not a dramatic figure, you know. It's about 50% more than the average of the country. We have an issue with indigenous people in Chile, and we have a commission which is dealing with this matter. Thank you.
All the bankers I know drink. They switched from scotch to wine here in California, one of our great exports. In fact, one of our great markets is China. When I drove from Santiago on a bad day when I couldn't see across town because the air was so bad, I went to Valparaiso just to get some sea air, and I drove through some of the most beautiful wine country in the world. Are wine exports from Chile one of your major leading items that you can get out on the international market? I see them even when I talk to my Australian friends. So there's an Australian campaign to dominate. There's apparently a Chilean view that their wines are excellent and have been exported, and there's a California view that we are the best. Do you know anything about wine exports from Chile?
Well, I sat on the board of a winery in Chile, Santa Rita, for many, many years. And I saw how that company, developed its export markets from very low levels to very attractive levels. I used to manage a fund, and we invested in Conchitoro, that is the main wine-producing company in Chile, that has had a very impressive record over the years. I think that in terms of price for quality, Chilean wines are really it's an excellent buy. I have seen Chilean wines in Asia, for instance, in Korea. If you go to any restaurant in Korea, Montes, for instance, is just a brand. I think they did a wonderful job. In China, last year I was the General Commission for the Chilean Pavilion in Expo Shanghai. As part of this is my second military service in Chile. I did my first military service in the Chilean Navy. My second was probably the external debt. And then 3 years ago, President Bachelet invited me to chair, with no pay, the Chile Pavilion in Expo Shanghai. And by the way, we were the #1 pavilion. We won the Oscar in Shanghai. With a small investment, we came out #1. And we strongly promoted two things, wines and pisco. Pisco, for instance, had not been introduced in China, and during 6 months we sold almost 70,000 bottles of pisco. That apparently is a very good number. And I saw also our wine selling very well in China, not just in the pavilion, but I checked with all the Chilean wineries. I think we have a very promising future. Right now, many of these wine producers are complaining about the exchange rate, about the cost of electricity, and this is a real problem. But I think that because of the quality of the wines, I'm a wine drinker, I love wines, and I think I have a son who really knows well. As part of my hobbies, I have a restaurant in Santiago. I have a daughter who went to one of these schools, culinary schools, and then she graduated, and she asked me to set up a restaurant. I said that if she was crazy, I said that, but I do have a restaurant now, and because of that, I'm very much involved in selecting wines and things like that. No, I think that we have a very promising future. In terms of that valley, I understand our gentleman here was the father of the valley. He is the one who developed, and we should be very proud of what he did in terms of that valley. But I understand that also further south, wines are being now produced further south. If you look at New Zealand, etc., I love Pinot Noirs, for instance, and I think we are doing now, I think our Pinot Noirs were not very good, but now I think we have 2 or 3 names that are quite good, and I think we have an interesting space in that. But again, I'm not an expert on wines. I just enjoyed my many years sitting on the board of a winery. I learned a lot, but I'm not obviously an expert. But I do believe that we have very interesting prospects. What we need to do in Chile is diversify. If you look at China, our main trading partner, 90-something% is copper. It's copper. It's copper. Aside from copper, is wine that are being introduced, pulp and paper, nitrate, but it's basically copper, and the same applies in Japan, etc. And this is something we have to move out, because the question is, what happens if eventually, well, I don't know, obviously we are not going to run out of copper. We have probably the largest reserves in the world, but I think we have to start planning in a sort of country business plan long term, how we diversify, and that's why I think we have been pioneering on the free trade agreements, because realizing that the Doha round is going nowhere, this world trading negotiation is not going anywhere because of, well, your own problems here in the U.S. I think the commercial policy of the U.S. is still not very well defined for obvious reasons. When you have high levels of unemployment, you have protectionists, you have some sort of isolationists, plus the situation in Europe, etc. The Chinese obviously are not the most free trade agreement fans in the world. That's why Chile has been promoting these free trade agreements. Every time we see a space, we try to enter and sign a free trade agreement because at least we have something binding. We have always believed in multilateral arrangements. We have supported the Doha round, but realizing that the Doha round has not gone anywhere. During the last 10 years, I have visited Geneva 5, 6 times with business people from APEC. And my own conclusion, in terms of the current political situation in the world, in this country, in Europe, there's no chance that the Doha round is going to be concluded. Or maybe you will have a very low common denominator Doha round. That being the case, our policy has been to try to sign free trade agreements everywhere you can. And our position has always been we want to have 100% opening. But unfortunately, even in a country like Japan, it's amazing. We were not able to achieve a very good free trade agreement, not because of us, but because agriculture in Japan is highly protected, and the same happens everywhere. Not to mention India. We have an agreement with India where tariffs were reduced from 300% to 50%, and we are very happy because 300 vis-a-vis 50. But we will continue to pursue that. We just finished with Malaysia. We are now conducting with Indonesia. And once you finish with Indonesia, frankly, in Asia, there are no more countries. In South America, in Latin America, we have agreement with every country. In Europe, we have agreements with the European Union and the non-European countries. And that means that only Africa is, and with Africa, we practically have no trade. So really, very shortly, assuming Indonesia comes on board, we will probably have 99% of our trade covered by free trade agreements. And again, our average tariff is 1%. 1%. It's nothing. It's nothing. And with the US, we are now running a deficit. And it's probably one of the very few cases in this country where you have a surplus. It's not a significant surplus that we cannot do much to help you, but...
I'm going to ask you a not difficult, but slightly embarrassing question. Last year, Los Angeles Opera launched a magnificent new opera based on the life of the greatest poet that ever left Chile, Pablo Neruda. So when I was in Chile this January, I said, I've never read Neruda, I should read him, so I read him. Then I went to my Chilean friends and I said, the only thing Neruda ever writes about is love, amore. And my Chilean friends, they were males, they said, that is because Chilean men are the best lovers in the world. Would you like to comment?
Well, I really don't know what to say. After that comment, I can say that Chilean people are very friendly, very open. We welcome all foreigners, but that we are good lovers, I cannot assure you that, really. Chile is a lovely country. Can we change it? Sure. Okay, thank you.
We have a reputation for being rather boring, gray, not very Latin. That is what you always hear from other Latin Americans, I have some Colombian friends of mine who say that Chile is a convent. We have a reputation of being a very conservative country, and it's really a conservative country in terms of some basic family issues. The influence of the church is strong in Chile. In political, economic, and social has been a very sort of liberal church. In other areas, it has been a conservative church. For instance, there have been big discussions about public television being able to publicize condoms. For many, many, including myself, this is a health problem. For many, this is a value problem. So it's a very conservative society, especially the middle classes are very, very conservative. And therefore, maybe that's why we have this reputation. But normally people think that we are gray, we are boring, we are serious, we are reliable, we answer the phone, you can trust your money with us. But we are not Latins in the sense of being, I understand some foreigners who spend weekends in Santiago, they prefer to go to Buenos Aires over the weekend and come back on Monday. That's what you hear. I honestly prefer to stay with that sort of reputation of being gray and serious and not too much fun.
Well, Consul General, one of the things you did in your country was that we always had a view of you as a people, and that women were basically at home taking care of children in a conservative kind of way, and then suddenly there was a woman who was president, and we admired this greatly. And then she's not just been president, she did we thought, a wonderful job, and then she's moved on to the United Nations. And there's rumors, I'm sure that you cannot comment on the rumors, that she might be the next Secretary General of the United Nations. And so Chile's women, at least, are going to take over the world. There's a woman next door in Argentina, now there's a woman in Brazil, so apparently the Latin lovers are giving way to their women. Do you want to comment?
No, all I can say is that President Bachelet is a wonderful woman. She's a very charismatic person. She had, at the beginning, the first year was a difficult one. She had some problems, but she overcome those problems, and she finished her government with very high rate of popularity. And this is all because of her courage and intelligence and very positive way of life, I would say. So she is really now running a very important organization at the United Nations, and she comes here from time to time to give some lectures. So if you have the opportunity, just go to Berkeley University and you will have the opportunity to see her. Regarding if she will be the next Secretary General of the United Nations, this is the first time that I hear that, but I have heard other things that I can tell you, that she probably can return to Chile and be our next president again. She's very popular in Chile, and she is by far the most popular political leader in the opposition right now. But of course, we have to wait more than 2 years until we know who will be our next president. But Chilean loves Michelle Bachelet, regardless if you are a rightist person or a leftist person, because she's a very nice person. I, as a Chilean, I'm very proud of her. Thank you.
Well, I have to tell you that a magic hour has come. First, I had wanted to recognize Julio Moreno, who is a wonderful professor here on campus and whose organization has co-sponsored us here tonight, as well as the World Affairs Council of Northern California, which is always willing to give us a little space in their newsletters. So we're always glad to have these co-sponsors. This was actually the last of our semester events. Today the university gives its last exams and graduation comes this weekend. But Angelina and I never sleep, so if you're here in this summer, we're going to have Richard Wagner's The Ring of the Nibelungen here in this room, telling you that Wagner was actually tremendously influenced by Buddhist sutras via Schopenhauer. Believe me, it'll be a lot lighter than it sounds. Wagner can actually be fun, so we hope you think about joining us then. And also the Japanese Consul General has contacted us and would like to bring a dance group here. So June is likely to be very cultural here at the center of the Pacific Rim. If you're not a member of the center and would like to be on our email list, there's a fishbowl outside. If you put your name and email there, you will get a card and an email from us for the rest of your life, whether you're in Chile or you're here. I want to say it's been a great privilege talking to these two gentlemen today. They are the best representatives of Chile I've met in a long time, and now my leftist views are slightly more moderate, And I'll think through those problems again. Please join me in thanking these two visitors to the university. Thank you. I'll take your microphone. We have wine outside, and then you can ask your questions of the Consul General or about visiting back to the city.